how much openness I can have in the game without losing quality, because it really is a quality over quantity scenario when there's just one person doing it.
The other day, I was looking through as many video games as I could find, right? I was trying to figure out how many games are based in Spain, because that was one of the selling points that we had talked about with your game, where like, there's just not a lot of them out there. And you're making it center stage for your game. And more than that, you're doing it in a way that is unique, and it's intriguing to me. So talk to me about how you went about doing that and how this world is structured.
So I wanted people to be able to just go and just walk down the street and say, hey, I've never seen this sign before in my life, and see the buildings, see this and that. Like, I wanted them to get some kind of a feel of how the architecture is and how the area. There's not going to be a lot of people around because it's like a warring situation. You are going to see like graffiti. It's very common to see graffiti in the big city and all kinds of different stuff. And the way that you mentioned that it would have been structured. First of all, the south of Spain, Andalusia, more specifically, which is like the biggest state in the south, it's home to what a lot of people recognize Spain for. For example, if you see the cartoons, you usually see like the flamenco, the dancing, that originated in Sevilla, which is if you play the demo, that will be the last map that you will see. That's more or less an idea of Sevilla. Then there is, you see like the bullfight. That's very traditional thing that you recognize Spain for. That's also from the south. Then you recognize some buildings that have like this Moorish or Northern Africa mixture and some Muslim influence with Christianity. That's also the south, because the Moors controlled southern Spain for a long time. And so there's a lot of things that you will recognize as Spanish. So I kind of wanted to do some kind of focus that will be traditionally known as Spanish, but also be able to showcase a little bit of the different cities. And since you mentioned about how I'm trying to go about it, of course, as an indie and a solo dev, I cannot do a whole open world map. I am finding ways that I could randomize things enough that might be different enough. The idea is that if you cross a certain location in the game as you progress in the story, from there on out, it will be kind of like a different city in Spain. You will see a little bit of a different architecture there. For example, again, the last map that you play in the demo will be kind of like the Sevilla, because you will see the Seville Cathedral, which is the largest Catholic cathedral in the world. If you went south, when you cross the river, it's supposed to be a different city. And when you go north, when you cross a specific line, it's supposed to be different cities to showcase some of their unique architecture and unique locations.
With that online community, right, a thought that comes to mind for me is like the culture within that online community. Because I think developers and like the etiquette online, how you interact with each other and things of that nature. I don't know, is it a positive mindset? Can it be more negative at times? How does that feel when you go into something like that? I know there is an overwhelming amount of developers that want to help each other and talk to each other, hype each other up. But, you know, from your perspective, when you look at that environment, what would your first like initial reaction be when explaining it?
When you first start off, it can be a little bit intimidating, and you might feel a little bit dumb because you're going there and you might ask some things, and for some reason some devs expect you to know certain things, and they would answer in a way or respond or do, well, this and that. It's like you're supposed to know these things. Like, no, I don't know. You know, that's what I'm asking. You know, it's like that's why I'm also wasting my time asking this question. You know, I just want to, you know, go around and waste your time and be a troll. No, I'm asking a very specific question. But there are some people that are just willing to help for whatever reason, either if it's out of the kindness of their heart because they know what's going on, or if they just want to show off. I don't care, as long as they get the information. And I'm like, thank you, I appreciate it, and I'm like, you're my hero, whatever. I'm thankful, and I can just keep on going because there's something. I'm working in Unreal Engine 5.2. That is the latest release of Unreal Engine. Right now, they're in the process of releasing 5.3, but it's not released yet. So there's not a lot of documentation. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of examples. There are a lot of bugs. There are a lot
Gotta
of
believe it.
things that you have to find out on your own. And I'm having a lot of certain issues that
Yeah.
I'm constantly having to struggle back and forth. So every so often I do ask, hey, what's going on here? And they have just recently released 5.2 like a few months ago, and now we're on to 5.3. So it's not like, dude, you have to be like on top of it all the time.
Yep.
So you can keep up. So you definitely have to ask some questions. So you always appreciate some people that are willing to, even if it's because they want to put up a YouTube video that so they can get more views or whatever. Hey, I appreciate the information.
You didn't have like a software background or like an engineering or like stuff that tied you into development. So what was the hardest aspect of that learning curve where you're getting into game development, you're learning the basics, you're starting to build your game out?
One of the bigger issues for me starting off was just learning how to code in Blueprint. I had to get some different assets from the store and try to open them up, try to figure out how they take. Watch a ton of YouTube videos, read a whole lot of Reddit posts and a whole bunch of Google stuff that you can find. And so I figured out how all these things work together. And I tried and tested and I crashed a bunch of times and I did this and that. Because when you're testing, you may encounter, you have an infinite loop, and crashes your system and things like that. Because it's important. You can't just throw assets in there and expect them to do stuff. There are usually some games that they try to market a little bit. They try to do the little bit of like climax build up to the demo release, and then everybody come and get the demo. It's actually released. And I did not do that at all. I just kind of say, you want to try the demo? I'm doing like a pre-beta build. I had them in Discord, try it out. They gave me some ideas, like change things, and then I put it on into Steam. So some people will just start seeing it over time, and then I just try to improve it before I got to F5. I didn't have the people, the time to just play test the heck out of it. I had to do that over time and then try to figure out some things that I wanted to try or do. And there were some things that I had to fix. And now that I'm getting closer to the fest, I'm a lot more confident. And I'm so grateful that I did it that way instead of being like, I'm just going to release the demo by these specs. The reception wise, it's been interesting because my game, the idea of the game is that the United States and Russia are essentially now BFFs are invading Spain. And you have to survive the invasion while you figure out what's going on and why. So my idea was like, hey, I don't think I'm gonna get a lot of people from Russia or the States interested in the game because of its nature, But it's so interesting that after I looked up the Steam stats, the most people that have gotten the game were from Russia. And the second one were from the States. That blew my mind because I was not expecting that reception. In fact, I wasn't expecting Russia to even show up on the list.
Obviously, you started this before everything happened in Europe and before what's going on broke out. But as that started to unfold, I have to imagine as a developer, you would kind of take a step back and you'd be like, all right, I got to assess that before I start going back into development. How did you decide to approach that after that whole situation unfolded? And moving into now, has there been like backlash towards that, or how has that worked for you?
I'm actually taking events from real life that happened and putting it into the game. And that was actually a part of it. And it was a trigger that sent things along the way of the story, which I cannot really discuss much.
I was gonna say, can you talk about you're taking things from real life and put it into the game? Can you elaborate on that, or no, that's gonna pull things from the story?
Okay, so let's see. There's something that you will find along the way, but let's say that the 9/11, the war, the player's father was in the military. He was in the Spanish military.
I see.
But because of 9/11 and the war on terror, at some point the father had to be sent to fight the war on terror.
I see.
And then he came back, was messed up, mother passed away, the father was never the same, all these trauma that came from, and this hatred that she feels it came from these people pushing war that it shouldn't happen, and then the puppet countries, which she would refer to as the Spanish government as a puppet, because they just went along with it. She hates all of that. She hates all the idea of war and anybody entangled with it. And then the later thing is just the Russian invasion. And it's just kind of like a trigger that just, it makes her really angry and brings back all the memories and things like that. So that's part of her drive, but still, she still doesn't know why they're invading Spain. I do like history. I do want it to have an impact on the game. I do want it to feel a little bit more realistic.
Your game it's ambitious. And so with that in mind, I think when I talk to developers who create larger scale games and they're 3D and they've got beautiful environments and they're really leaning into that aesthetic, is there a concern when you're releasing your game that players are going to try to compare it to AAA titles that try to do similar things, where they're giving you large scale worlds, they're putting you in these crazy environments that you can explore? As a developer, I think a lot of times you just write that off and you say, you know what, they're AAA, I'm indie, there should be no comparison. But the problem, or maybe not the problem, but one of the things that players, I think, overlook sometimes, unfortunately, is the disparity between those team sizes, 1 or 2 people versus 500 people, where it's maybe they'll look at your game and they'll just instantly write it off because it's not too AAA quality or whatever it may be. I'm not saying your game isn't, but as just a general statement. So is that something that you have thought about while you're creating this game, and how have you approached that if that's the case?
Of course, I want to try to do it as much quality as I can. That part of my balance, I'm trying to see, okay, how much openness I can have in the game without losing quality, because it really is a quality over quantity scenario when there's just one person doing it. It really is. Though I want to have this area have more details, things to real life and things like that, or do I just want to have a bunch of randomized things so I can open up the world more? Because doing just one road, it could take me weeks. While if I do several things enough and randomize it enough, I could do a whole city in the same time frame. So it's just will it take away the European Spanish feel if I do randomize it enough? Will it take away the openness on exploration if I don't and I only focus on linear gameplay? It's a really hard question there's a really hard question that I've had to ask myself, and I'm still debating, I'm still working on it. Usually when it comes at me with those comparisons, I say, okay, what other solo indie game are you comparing my game to? I am using the latest Unreal Engine thing to make it as proficient as possible, as good as I can, and with everything that I've learned and I'm learning, there are many times that I've had to backtrack and update some things to make them look better or make them feel better or whatever, and I do it because I want it to be as good as I possibly can make it.
Social media is a massive part of every game's dev cycle right now. And for you, talking about that, how do you maneuver those negative comments, right?
The perception of what people have of indie games is that most indie games are either platformers or 2D. And it's actually pretty accurate. I mean, if you have looked through the last Steam Fest, through the last years, most of the indie games have been
2D platformers or Metroidvanias.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So when they see a game that is 3D as mine, as a third-person shooter, things like that, it's out of the norm. So they instantly okay, that's the idea when it comes to indie games. So I think people do judge it a little bit harder because they don't realize, oh, this is a solo indie game. Because some people actually legit judge it really badly, and this goes into looking into the comments. I do look through every comment I get. I look through every one.
Yeah.
And some are good, some were not so good, but I still look at it like I'm in the TikTok world, and I'm like, okay, give me some negative comments because I will TikTok about it.
The TikTok cycle. Yep.
Give me your negative comment. I'll take it and I will bring it back. I don't care because I know how much effort I'm putting into it. How much care and detail and things like that. And if you're happy to spend 5 seconds or 30 seconds and leave your negative comment, I'm happy to use your comment for my benefit on
to market the game. There we go.
So whatever. I definitely did struggle quite a little bit with the combat because yes, it does have multiple layers to it. My approach was I need to try to make this as fun as possible for me because I'm gonna have to play test the heck out of it. And then when you bring in special abilities, when you bring in the gun, that it all has different effects on the enemies and around them. I think so that it can be very job intensive. What I like a lot about the combat, and I just enjoy it a lot overall. I enjoy like ragdolling enemies because that's one of the things about the game, that you will be able to ragdoll your enemy in different ways, and it's even going to be a skill that you can level up that it does more damage. For example, you will be able to ragdoll your enemy if you do a counter. If you do it at the right time when you counter them, they will ragdoll. Or if you run and kick them, it will just kick them back and be a ragdoll. You can teleport them into the air and drop them, and they will ragdoll and things like that. So, and I just enjoy the ragdoll mechanic. When it comes to bringing all these mechanics together, yes, it was very labor intensive to do some things like melee combat and counter and things like that. Counter from different directions, counter with different hands, counter with different kick attacks and things like that.
Walk me through implementing something like that on the technical side of things, how you approached it and how difficult that was. Because like you said, the melee and the combat, that's hard. But then the teleportation, that's a whole other animal because like I said, there's gravity involved. You're dropping I don't know, let's say you're dropping a tank on something, like that is completely different from dropping like I don't know, an enemy NPC on something. So how did you sort that out and bring that into this game?
I had to do a lot of check and balances. For example, when you do teleport a tank on top of somebody, the tank of itself is usually just a static object that is just there. Usually, if he doesn't come in contact with anybody, if he just touches somebody, he's not going to do anything. But when you drop it, it has to do something. So the check there was that while it's being dropped, I had to enable that once it hits something, it will trigger something else, like deal damage, knock them out, ragdoll them, whatever. And then there was the other aspect, because there's the ability to tele missiles, which is it's essentially like a rods of God that you teleport something heavy and big really high up in the air, and they just drop it and then let momentum do its thing. So I had to add the effects, that fire blowing up and things like that. And then when it goes and it hits something, then it will be an explosion. It's a different mechanic. It's not about ragdolling anything. It's just about when it hits on contact, it blows everything up, then it sets things on fire, and then it gets a big explosion enough that it will blow people away, damage them. It could hurt you too if you're close enough. And then the effects of itself, you have to be able to time the effects, the fire spreading out. You have to be able to time the sound affecting the enemies, because it will be a big sound. So people, the NPCs that hear that, they'll be like, I need to go inspect what's going on. It could be the explosion. So it needs to be some kind of realism to it, right? So that's the idea behind that mechanic.
Once this game releases, do you think about something like localization? And how would you approach localization with a game that has multiple languages in it?
I mean, at the moment, I don't even have a voice actor for the main character. So the main character just has the subtitles or things that she says or thinks, and that's it. The soldiers, they do speak, and that is something that I've created through some programs and things like that. I don't speak Russian, so I have to translate things that they would have to say. So at the moment, what I have thought about is like, if I do plan to do it through the different languages, it would just simply be translate what the player would say and the UI. That's basically all the things that I would change at the moment, because the language.
I say a couple other things outside of localization, right? With something like your game currently doesn't have a publisher. I believe your game currently is not controller compatible. How did you approach those decisions, and what is the outlook for those decisions moving into like early 2024 at a release date?
The controller compatible thing, it's not a no situation. It's more of I need to make sure I have the keyboard, because it is a PC game. I need to make sure that the key bindings are good and they feel good to the player as is, because there's a lot of different mechanics and a lot of things that are used, which are not usually used in other games, I guess. For example, the middle mouse button, it's usually not used in most games. And in this game, you would have to use it a lot, like for your teleportation. First, my priority is that it is a PC game. I want to get that down. Since I'm still adding more skills, I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to place them. That's my priority first. And then I am planning on eventually having it controller compatible. When it comes to the publishers, I've been approached a little bit by some things, and I quickly informed them that at the moment I'm waiting until after February, after some time, until the game is a little bit more developed, until I've entered in some fest, until I've gotten some more feedback, until I have a bigger bargaining chip, honestly. And then afterwards, I will see what they're saying, what they're offering, what they have in mind.
I think right now in the US, the one thing that a lot of people are talking about is like diversity in game development, right? They want to bring in diversity and change it. And like, I've talked to a couple developers who have touched on that a little bit, where they'll talk about like, diversity brings in different perspectives, it brings in different stories, it brings new people to the table, and it creates this element where you can draw people in because of that. And this is more, that goes without saying, as a cultural aspect too, right? Because cultural diversity is something that arguably is globally is even more impactful, because you're looking at these different cultures, like you said, that otherwise you would never be able to really experience. Like, I've never been to Japan either, and I've seen Japanese games. They kind of give you that feel of like, what that world is kind of like. It gives you that like snapshot or whatever. So it is interesting. Or like what was it, the newest God of War, it gave you like the Nordic feel of like old world Nordic states and things of that nature. So like, it gives you a look at a culture or a society or a period in time that otherwise you never would have really had the ability to see or experience. And that can only push creativity and push the boundaries, and it can only be good for the gaming community, in my opinion. So
yeah, I do believe that. So just like little things will give you a little bit more of a hint of the culture. It might be different than what you had experienced. For example, I lived most of my life in Miami or West Palm in Florida. There are a whole bunch of orange trees in Florida, but I've never seen orange trees just randomly throughout the city. When I came to Spain, however, which was a little bit of a culture shock for me, it was just different. I would see it throughout the city. It was just random orange trees. Just random orange trees. I was like, what?
Yeah.
It's just a little bit weird. Not weird in a bad way, but just a little bit different and pleasant at the same time, because you have a different experience. So I have orange trees in the game. Like, it's just what it is. It's just that little tiny thing that it just sets it apart and brings it close to real life, which is, I don't know. It's just that those little details,
Yeah, it really is. It's little details. I never would have ever thought that southern Spain has orange trees, to be honest. I've never really thought about it either, but
this is not like a sprint to the finish line. You can't just be all good on feels and like, I'm so excited, I'm going to build a game, I'm going to get done. The idea here is that, yes, when you're hyped up, when you start off, you're all excited, like, man, I'm going to build my dream game. This is going to be awesome. I have all this engine and things like that. And then you're flying, you're roaring, man, you're up there. And then you find out that you know how to do these things. And then you hit a wall, and then you hit you don't have funding. Then you hit this and that. Then you hit a bug, and then your game crashes, and then you have to start over from like 3 days work because you forgot to save this or that or back up or different things along the way. And so along the way, you get worn out, man. That's why you have to learn how, like, you can't run on feelings, can't run on fumes. Sometimes you have to trust that guy from 2 or 5 years or whenever you started that told you this was a good idea and just keep on going. It's like, that guy had a good idea, that guy had it figured out. I'm going to trust that guy because I can't trust this guy right now. The important thing for me, I believe, is learn how to walk, get up every day and get some steps in. I need to get my steps in, even if it's like an hour or you can do more, great, and things like that. But to get things in the flow, there's that guilt factor that, hey, there's also the game developer. There's also life that you gotta do life. If you have a family, you have to spend time with your family. Because once your project is done, your family is still there. Before your project started, your family was there. And then when you do take that rest, you kind of
feel bad about it.
You feel bad, you feel guilty because you didn't spend time with family or you didn't do the game.
Yeah, so exactly.
It's a tough spot.
No, I agree with that. I think it's an aspect of development a lot of people don't talk about, but it's one that's very important because a lot of developers, when you go into it, especially if you don't have a coding base or engineering background or like a game dev background in general, you go in and you're super excited and you just go all out on it. And then after like you mentioned, a couple months or whatever it may be, and things aren't going the way you thought they would, and it's not just like you cranked out this game and you're done, all of a sudden you start to get down on yourself, things start to add up. And content creation, as you mentioned, is something similar where you're constantly doing it because you want to force yourself to do it, because if you don't do it, like you said, nobody else is going to do it for you. And then you also have to balance that guilt because as you're doing it, you're also taking time away from other stuff in your personal life. So then all of a sudden it's like, yes, it needs done, but then you also need to take time for the other things like you mentioned, for your family, for, you know, everything going on in your personal life. But then when you do that, all of a sudden you realize your content creation, your game is just left on the shelf. And it's just like, it's a double-edged sword because you can't really win ultimately.
Yes, definitely. It's the same thing because you have so much information going on in your mind at the same time where what I'm doing, where I'm going, you know, how I need to get it done. And then when you come back, it's like, okay, what was that information or what was I supposed to be doing? That's why I think it's so important to write things down. But even then, you do have to get it back into the rhythm. Okay, I have all these things set up, using that. I mean, I don't want to say it's a necessary evil to take the page, but like sometimes it feels like that, but it's very important. It's very for your mental health, for just your regular health.